I'm Ric Edelman. Straight ahead, everything from the cost of whole life insurance to the cost of funerals, from buying a second home by the water to paying for the second half of college, all without ruining your chance to retire. It's The Truth About Money, and it's coming up right now.
Best-selling author and founder of one of the nation's largest financial planning firms, Ric Edelman.
Do you think that the rich are different? Well, guess what? They make the same mistakes as you do when they buy a second home. My colleague Brandon Corso checked it out with realtor Todd Donnelly in Palm Beach, Florida.
It's lovely here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so peaceful. Todd, give me an idea for what some of these houses here on the water would sell for.
Those homes would generally go from the low $1 million, 1.2, to upwards of $2 million for some of the really larger ones. And then some of these older homes in front of us are actually going to sell for in the 700 to 900,000 range.
How many of these are second homes, would you say?
Well, a lot of the really wealthy waterfront homes are second homes. It's amazing how many $3 million mansions are only lived in.
Incredible.
2 months a year. Michael Jordan, Celine Dion, Tom Cruise, these are all people who have owned homes here. We're going to put the boat away.
So how much is this house listed for?
So this home would have sold for around $1.5 million at the peak of the boom. It's waterfront, dock, pool, a lovely property. Now we're seeing people take property like this for $700,000.
Wow.
That's an amazing value.
If somebody calls you and says, I'm in the market for a second house, what advice do you have from the very beginning?
Generally, I like to have people come to the area and stay for a week or a month or longer and rent a short-term vacation rental.
Okay.
And check out neighborhoods, talk to other people in the community, make sure that they're comfortable that this is where they want to either vacation or ultimately retire.
Okay, so rushing into a purchase is a mistake. What other mistakes do you see people making?
A lot of people don't check out the additional costs for owning what they buy. For instance, taxes, insurance, and community association dues. Those can really impact the carrying costs of owning a property.
So what about financing second homes? Is it different today than it was, say, 5 years ago?
Absolutely. 5 years ago, if you could breathe and fog a mirror, you'd get a loan. Now they're seeing requirements of 20, 30, even 40% in order for a bank to write a loan on a second property.
And in the real estate boom, what helps to hold value the best down here in Florida?
Well, we're sitting at a waterfront property, and in Palm Beach County, they're not making any more new waterfront property.
That's a shame.
Brandon, good to be back with you. It's really interesting how he just splashed cold water on the whole idea of buying a second home. He raised all the costs associated with it that go far beyond the purchase price. The one thing he didn't mention is the cost of furniture.
Well, furniture and maintenance, and we're working with people over the years, you focus on the purchase price of the house and you forget about everything else. And that's a big mistake because you want to be able to afford the place after you move into it.
And if you're only going to be there 2 months out of the year, like he described, who's taking care of the property for the other 10 months?
Huge maintenance costs, and that, I think, can go a long way in helping somebody determine whether or not it makes sense to have a second place. If you're going to spend several weeks a year, there's no way the hassles will be worth it. You need to be talking about months and months a year.
Because I'm just wondering, not just the furniture, but clothing, the electronics, all the television and the stereos, clock radios, everything has to be duplicated from your current home into this new second home. And the costs just keep on going.
Well, the costs do, and so does the time and effort. And so there's a hassle factor. Isn't it nice to be able to just rent a place? You don't have to worry about it before or when you leave. So you can weigh both to determine what's right for you and your family.
His best advice was before you buy that house, visit it often, stay there a long time, make sure you really do love it.
Isn't that the truth? How many times have we seen people pick a location only to say that they wish they picked another place?
Brandon, thanks very much.
You bet.
In order to pay for a child's education, you should take out a home equity loan, take out student loans, invest in a college tuition prepayment plan, or invest in a 529 plan? The answer's coming up after this segment.
At a recent conference, investment advisors were asked just one question. What did they think of whole life insurance?
Most people that have whole life insurance probably don't need it. They could probably own term insurance to provide what they need. There are some occasions where it applies, though.
I think it's a poor investment. Buy term and invest the difference.
I understand it, but most consumers don't, so they should probably avoid it.
So, how should you pay for your child's education? The best way is to invest in a 529 plan, and don't wait until the last minute.
Terry, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Rick. Thanks for taking the call. Love your show.
Well, thank you very much. How can we help you, Terry?
Okay, way back in from 98 to 2001, I worked for a consulting company that was later bought out by another company. That company was bought out. That company was bought out. I left in 2001. Over all that time, there were stock splits, reverse stock splits. I was in the stock purchase plan, and now the stock is so far underwater, I'm dumping it all. Problem is, I didn't keep any of the records because they're so old, and I figured
of course you didn't.
Would have it, and
of course you didn't keep any records.
Well, I did for a long time, but after 12 years, I went ahead and shredded them probably a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean I've kept all these for so long, and why do I need them any longer?
What you have done is wrong.
So it's a common tale. I mean, you have to. Who's going to keep the stupid paperwork for decades and decades and all this stuff until the day comes when they kind of wish they had? So you're trying to figure out the price you paid for the stock, am I right?
Correct.
How does he figure it out?
Well, fortunately, Steve, you've only got to go back a little bit over 10 years, so I'm willing to bet you're going to be able to get the data. But you've got to go back to 1998 and figure out, okay, when I was deferring my income to buy the shares at that point, what financial institution held the shares? They might be able to go back and get those records for you.
I actually tried going back that way, and some of them say, well, we're only required to hold for 7 years.
Yeah.
So
was this
is fessing up at this point?
At any point, was this a publicly traded company?
It was always a publicly traded company.
Okay, then in that case, you can go back to public stock records because those stock prices are available going back to the inception of the company. So since you were paid twice a month over the last 10 years, you can look at the stock price over the last 10 years, over those months, and you know how much of your pay, roughly, was put into the plan, and you can do some math to get a fairly good estimate of how many shares you bought with each paycheck and the price per share at the time of those paychecks to kind of figure out your cost basis.
Well, the extra wrinkle is that they would lock in a certain price twice a year, and that's the price you paid for the entire 6 months.
And you need the records of knowing what that number was.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so I would assume that was an average stock price. So you might be able to go on that basis. Say, well, here was the average stock price of the year for that year, and that is a good proxy. You need to show a demonstrated best efforts to try to figure out that number. Let's face it, if you're ever audited, which is the only reason this ever matters, you need to be able to demonstrate to the IRS your methodology for determining your cost basis, because remember, the IRS isn't going to be able to do any better of a job than you in figuring it out. So as long as you demonstrate a good faith effort to come up with a reasonable number, that'll probably fly.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah, it doesn't help as much as my being able to say, oh, look, here, I have the number for you. But it's a reinforcement of the message, never throw away financial records. If you own an asset, keep every piece of paper associated to that asset for as long as you own that asset and 7 years afterward.
Well, the last time I sold off assets, the holding company actually sent me a breakdown of everything.
Oh, wow, lucky you. And
you
were hoping that would happen. Yeah, you were hoping that would happen this time.
Yeah.
Hoping too much. They laid me off, so I don't trust them anyway.
There you go. Terry, best of luck. I hope it works out.
Everything's so expensive, man. You gotta make money some kind of way, and stuff is just crazy out here. I had an aunt pass away down in Norfolk, Virginia. Her funeral was $11,000. Can you believe that? 11 grand. And doctors are talking about black people are living longer. I guess so. We can't afford to die at these prices. Brother better try to hold on. $11,000? That's why black people don't commit suicide. Because if you want to kill yourself, you got to save up for it first.
Hi, Rick. My question has to do with Social Security, retirement benefits, and early withdrawal. As I'm approaching retirement age, a lot of my friends at the age of 62 and a half are starting to withdraw their Social Security. And although they're having a penalty, they say in the long run, they'll make more money. And I'm concerned because I'm saying to myself, if I withdraw early, I'm going to be paying taxes on it versus waiting until I'm of retirement age and my income drops. Could you provide the pros and cons to the thinking on this?
It depends on a variety of factors. The big question, when should I start taking my Social Security? So let's examine the situation. First, you're not yet retired.
Correct.
Therefore, stop the conversation immediately. If you're not retired, don't take Social Security until you at least reach full retirement age. So even though you're eligible to take Social Security younger, 62, 63, what have you, if you're still working, don't. Because as you pointed out, you're going to pay taxes on a big portion of that Social Security income. Chances are you don't even need the income because you still have a full-time occupation.
Right.
Therefore, we generally say, wait until you reach full retirement age, because at that point, you can begin taking the money without the tax liability. So don't take the money yet. Your friends who are already retired at a younger age, okay, if you're retired at 63, go ahead and take the money. Perhaps that's what their situation is. Or if you're in difficult financial straits, the income you have isn't enough to cover your needs, and you absolutely need this cash, okay then, take the money early if you really have to. I'd really rather you didn't. The longer you delay taking Social Security, the more you're ultimately going to get per year. Now, some people will do some math, and they'll say, even if I don't need the money at 64, taking it and investing it will enable that money to grow to a future higher value, and it'll be worthwhile. And we would generally agree if you're going to be retired when you take the money. But there are another couple of other factors that might interfere with this. Number one, are you married? And
Yes.
you're married, and is your husband still working?
Oh, yes.
And what's the age disparity between the two of you? Is it
It's 10 years.
It's 10 years. Because sometimes you make more money as a spouse of a worker than as a worker yourself. So we need to do a series of calculations and analysis to determine for each of you, based on your ages, marital status, how many quarters of contribution into the Social Security system as opposed to, say, military pay or federal government service and so on, to determine when it should really work out. There is no rule of thumb. There is no general answer that I can give you, other than to say, generally speaking, the longer you delay, the better off you're often going to be. But as soon as you do quit working, take the money and run.
Okay, thank you.
Money's a weird subject, man. It's always, like, everybody views money differently. I saw this Oprah thing, this masterclass with Ted Turner. Ted Turner at one point, when he merged AOL and Time Warner, when he did that merger, he lost $7 billion. Ted Turner looks into the camera and says, "There's no need in crying over spilled milk." Like, that's not milk, you idiot. What kind of milk is that? That must be buttermilk. That milk must have came from a cash cow.
Hi, Rick. I'm wondering how to pay for the last 2 years of college for my son. We were able to pay for the first 2 years, but now we can't pay for the last 2. Should he take out a loan, a student loan, or should we put it on a home equity loan? That's all I need to know.
Well, in today's economic environment, it's no surprise that a lot of people are struggling with major expenses, college being one of the most significant. But there's more to life than college. There's also your retirement to think about. And for that reason, your son's college has to take a second place to your retirement objectives. And for that reason alone, I'm going to give you some tough love. Your son is now on his own for graduating from college. That means he needs to get student loans, he needs to go get a job in the summertime to rake some money, and he might even need to take a year or 2 off to go to work full-time to make even more money. Alternatively, consider transferring to a lower-priced college to get that degree. Bottom line is this: under no circumstances should you tap into your home equity to pay for college for your son. The reason is simple. You need to leave that equity alone so that it can serve as a nest egg for you in retirement. Now, if this sounds unduly harsh or even selfish, keep in mind that there's a reason I'm saying this. Your son has 40 years to pay off that education. You can literally pay for college while you're working, but you can't pay for retirement while you're in retirement. Retirement must be pre-funded, and for that reason, you need to make sure that your son's need for a college degree does not take priority over your need to save for retirement.
In a study of 2,000 critically ill patients done by the Journal of the American Medical Association, how many of the patients lost their life savings as a result of their illness? Was it 5%, 12%, 16%, or 31%? The answer is coming up in just a few moments.
You know, when you go on the road with a TV crew, people just show up. Take this, for example. We were shooting for another episode of The Truth About Money at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in Las Vegas, you know, where the TV show Pawn Stars is filmed, and guess who walked by? Here's a hint. He's a country music legend with a really deep voice and enough gold and platinum records to start his own precious metals fund.
Randy, it's obvious you're one of the most successful recording artists in American history, but when you first started out, was your goal to be just getting your music out there, or did you see this as the opportunity to become very wealthy?
No, I wanted to make a living singing and writing songs and had no dreams of any awards or no.
Did anybody tell you you'll never make it, it's too hard, there's too much competition, how are you going to break out?
Many people said that. Oh yeah, many people said that.
But it didn't deter you.
No, some might say that's lack of sense, but you know, I continued doing other jobs, obviously. I went to work at 15 and not been without a job since, you know, and started singing in clubs at 14, and so, no, I just kept pursuing this career and wanting to make a living writing and singing.
What was the first recording contract you got? Well, how old were you at that point?
There was an independent label called Paula Records out of Shreveport, Louisiana, and I was about 17. I was about 18 probably then. That was the first.
And looking back on that, would you say that that deal you struck was a fair deal for you at that time? Or looking back on it, would you feel you were taken advantage of maybe?
I'm guessing no one was taken advantage of. I'm guessing none of us knew exactly what we were doing for the most part at that age. And then, of course, years went by and signed with Warner Brothers, which I've been with now for 25 years.
Which means you're pretty satisfied with the relationship.
It's been a good relationship for a lot of years, yeah.
So a lot of folks don't understand the economics of the music industry. When you cut a contract, how is the compensation? Is it based on the number of albums you produce? Is it based on how much they're sold? Is it based on the success of those albums?
As far as doing a deal in the music business, it's totally based on how much clout you might have with the passing of time. You know, your deal may be different. I remember early on, I had signed with Warner's, and it was somewhere around, these were albums then, not CDs, right, and not downloads, of course. It was based on something like about $2 per album sold that I would have been getting.
And was that all up front, or you had to wait?
Based on as the sales.
Based on actual sales.
Mm-hmm. Then there was a deal which you had received a check for, I don't remember the number, but whatever it was for signing with the label, right? Then there is your writing royalties that everyone's going to get the same check there, basically. Years ago, it used to work like this. I wish it still worked this simple. You record the album. You had a promotion staff calling a radio rather, and you'd put that single out. The promotion staff would call radio, you'd get airplay, then you'd tour to promote that record.
But the internet has changed.
Not quite that simple anymore.
They've changed all that. So how has it gotten more complicated?
You get into, there's so many outlets now to advertise songs. And even when you look at just doing these mini albums, and then if that starts working for you, then you go ahead and finish that album. Then you're downloading, then there's the iTunes. It's so much more complicated.
Is this something that a typical artist today can do on their own, or do you need to rely on business personnel, people that are knowledgeable about the technology side of
it? It depends on the person. There are people I know in this business who are artists who have all kinds of knowledge where internet is concerned. Then there's people like me who well, to give you a good example, I was 50 years old before I had my first cell phone, so this is not high on my priority list.
So better to rely on others to assist?
I prefer to have others tell me what we need to do, what makes sense, and then we make decisions based on what we have there.
Have you found that the business side of the industry has interfered at all with the art?
Yes and no. Let me explain that better. Maybe. I find that as this business goes farther and farther, you see people, all right, let's face it, you can make records now because of the Pro Tools, because of the ability to move phrasing around, to tune vocals. Probably won't get a lot of good press on this, but I find there are some folks who come along now, I question the caliber of the material going out, but it's based on radio-friendly records and not necessarily based on a lot of heart and soul and songs, yeah.
What advice would you give to someone trying to break through today? Go back to when, if you could talk to yourself at age 14, what would you want yourself to know?
I'd do it the same way. I find that I kept getting the same advice years ago. It's like, record what you love, because you're the one on stage singing it every night. And I'd do it the same way. I can honestly say I've never recorded anything that I truly did not care for based on someone telling me you should do it. So
because it's going to be a commercial success.
Do what you love. And that's what I've done, and I'm very proud to say that.
Randy, thanks so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
In a study of 2,000 critically ill patients done by the Journal of the American Medical Association, nearly 31% lost their entire life savings as a result of their illness.
Before we go, a couple of thoughts on today's program. Most of the time, I try to tell you what you should do. Save money early and often. Stay diversified so your money stays safe. Today, though, we talked about things you shouldn't do. Don't buy a second home without making absolutely sure that you really want to live in it. Don't throw away financial records for at least 7 years, and in many cases, not ever. And most important, do not tap into the equity of your home to pay for college. These don'ts surprise a lot of people. But if you want to achieve financial success, you need to understand that the strategies you don't follow are as important as the strategies that you do follow. And that's the truth about money. I'm Ric Edelman. See you next week.